At the winter fundraising gala, my son stepped onto the stage beneath the sign bearing my late wife's name and told hundreds of donors, "This sanctuary needs vision, now not an old man clinging to dying animals." The room went silent. Then my daughter-in-law leaned toward me, smiling coldly. "You should be grateful we still let you sit here." I looked down at the old dog lying beside my chair, his blinking green collar catching the light. Then I looked back at them and said, "No. You should be afraid I stayed right here tonight. I'm glad you're here with me for this one." Before the story continues, leave a quick comment. Have you ever had to choose between loyalty and doing what's right? Just yes or no is fine. Quick note, some details are fictionalized for storytelling, but the heart of the message is what I hope stays with you. That morning, I saw my son's car in the parking lot at 6 in the morning, 3 hours before he ever arrived, and I knew something had already started that I had not yet seen. I was 69 years old, a former firefighter who had spent 26 years building Thatcher Ridge Animal Sanctuary with my wife Alice, and I had learned in burning buildings that smoke appears before fire. Gerald's silver Lexus sat in the gravel lot beside Marlene's car, both of them standing near the oak tree at the property's edge, staring at the land with the focused attention people give to things they are measuring. Ranger walked beside me, the way he had every morning since Alice died 6 weeks ago. He was an 11-year-old rescue dog with arthritis in his hind legs, gray around the muzzle, the kind of animal other shelters called unadoptable. He had slept beside Alice's chair every night through her chemotherapy, and when she stopped waking up, he stopped leaving my side. We did the morning patrol together, same route Alice and I had walked since 1997. Check the perimeter fence, count the outdoor kennels, make sure no one left food where raccoons could reach it. Ranger knew every turn without being told. He stopped at the garden corner, where Alice used to sit with her coffee and her notebook, writing down things that needed fixing. The bench was still there. The notebook was in my truck. Ranger stared at the empty space for 10 seconds, then looked up at me with eyes that understood absence. I rested my hand on his head. Neither of us said anything. We had been doing this every morning since the funeral. The sanctuary was quiet except for the dogs waking up in the kennels and the sound of Gerald's car door closing in the distance. My son, 38 years old, the sanctuary's CFO, stood with his wife Marlene beside him. She was 35, a PR specialist for luxury brands, and she measured the property with her eyes the way developers measure square footage. They did not see me. They were too focused on whatever they were calculating. I finished the patrol and went inside to make coffee. By the time the sun came up, both cars were gone. That was the thing about grief. It made you miss the obvious things, like your own son measuring the land you built, with your wife's ashes still warm in the ground. 3 days later, Preston Sutton arrived with a check. He was 61, CEO of Sutton Pacific Realty, the kind of man who wore expensive suits to animal sanctuaries and called it humility. He brought a photographer and a reporter named Silas Kendrick, 35, from the Oregonian, who showed up with his notebook ready to write what he thought was a simple donation story. The check was for $50,000. Preston stood in the parking lot at noon with Gerald and Marlene beside him, all three of them smiling while Silas took photos. I watched from the office doorway. Ranger sat at my feet. "This sanctuary does incredible work," Preston said to the camera, his hand on Gerald's shoulder, like they were old friends. "Alice Thatcher built something truly special here, and I'm honored to support her legacy." Gerald smiled. Marlene nodded. Silas wrote it all down. The photo session lasted 15 minutes. Handshakes, smiles, the check held up for the camera. Then Silas packed his equipment, thanked everyone, and left. I stayed in the doorway. I had learned in 28 years of firefighting that the real story starts after the cameras leave. Preston walked with Gerald toward the property's edge near the oak tree where I had seen them 3 days earlier. Marlene followed. They stopped at the fence line, looking out over the 12 acres Alice and I had cleared by hand in 1997. I could not hear them from the office, but I stepped outside, walked toward the kennels, close enough. Preston's voice carried in the still air. He was not whispering, but he was not projecting either. Just loud enough for Gerald to hear, just quiet enough to think no one else would. "The land alone is worth $12 million, Preston said. "The brand is worth another 3. Don't waste it on dogs that nobody wants." Gerald said nothing. He nodded. Marlene looked at her phone. I stood 20 feet away beside the kennel gate, close enough to hear every word, far enough that they had not noticed me yet. Ranger sat beside me, silent. Preston turned and saw me. He did not look surprised. He did not look guilty. He gave me a polite nod, the kind you give a stranger in a parking lot, and said, "Mr. Thatcher." Then he walked to his car and drove away. Gerald and Marlene followed 30 seconds later. Neither of them looked at me. I stood there for a long time after they left Ranger at my feet, looking at the land Alice and I had built from nothing. We had cleared the trees ourselves, poured the concrete for the kennels, installed the fencing one post at a time. She had painted the sign by hand, Thatcher Ridge Animal Sanctuary. No abandoned soul turned away. 26 years, $12 million. Dogs that nobody wants. He had said it, out loud. The same words Alice had made me promise 26 years ago that I would never let anyone say about a single animal that came through our gates. I said nothing. I went back to the kennels and fed the old ones first the way I always do. The ones with Arthritis the blind cat in Kennel 7, the shepherd mix, who had been returned 4 times before we took him permanently. But I started keeping notes that afternoon. Old habit from the firehouse. When you do not know what evidence will matter, you keep everything. I wrote down the date, the time, exactly what Preston said, exactly where Gerald was standing when he nodded. I wrote it in Alice's notebook, the one from the garden bench on the page after her last entry bench by Oak Needs Fixing. I did not know what I was gathering evidence for yet, but I knew smoke when I saw it, and I had learned a long time ago that smoke always means fire is coming. Ranger slept under my chair, while I wrote his collar tag clinking softly against the metal bowl I kept filled with water beside the desk. 2 weeks later, Marlene would begin her campaign, and I would understand exactly what Preston's whisper meant. 2 weeks after I started keeping notes, Marlene walked through the sanctuary hallway with a clipboard in one hand and her phone camera in the other, photographing every dirty corner she had created herself. She arrived on a Tuesday afternoon when the kennel staff was stretched thin. I was cleaning the back row of cages, the ones that housed the older dogs with incontinence issues and arthritis. Ranger lay in the doorway, watching me work. Marlene stopped at Kennel 14, where the floor had not been mopped since morning. She took a photo. Then she wrote something on her clipboard. She moved to Kennel 16, where the water bowl had dried out, because we no longer had enough volunteers to check them twice a day. Another photo, more notes. I kept cleaning. I did not look at her. I had learned in 28 years of firefighting that some people start fires just to watch you put them out. Serena Lancaster stood near the supply closet watching. She was 17 years old, a volunteer who had been coming to the sanctuary every weekend for 2 years, helping with the animals the way some teenagers help, because their parents make them, and some help because they understand what it means to care for things that cannot care for themselves. Serena was the second kind. Marlene stopped in the center of the hallway and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "People donate for the animals," she said to the staff members, within earshot, her voice carrying the practiced tone of someone who has rehearsed what sounds like spontaneous concern. "Not for an old man who smells like wet fur." Serena looked at me. I met her eyes for 1 second, then went back to cleaning. I did not respond. I finished mopping Kennel 14, refilled the water bowl in 16, and logged both tasks in the daily checklist Alice had created in 1997. Entry 47 in my notebook would be written that evening. Date, time, witnesses' exact words. Marlene left 20 minutes later, her clipboard full of photos documenting neglect that had not existed until she cut the cleaning budget 3 months ago. There is a particular kind of cruelty in being humiliated inside the walls you built with your own hands by someone who married into your name and learned to say it like an insult. Serena stayed after Marlene left. She did not ask if I was all right. She just picked up a mop and started cleaning Kennel 17 without being asked. That evening, Gerald came to my office. He stood in the doorway for 10 seconds before speaking the way people stand when they have practiced what they are about to say, but have not practiced how to start saying it. "Dad," he said finally, "the sanctuary is losing money every quarter. Mom is gone. You can't run this alone. We need to think about the future." I looked up from the computer where I had been reviewing the quarterly budget, the same budget Marlene had rewritten 3 months ago to reduce costs in precisely the areas that would make the sanctuary look neglected. "Whose future?" I asked. He stepped into the office. He was 38 years old, my son. The boy I had raised to understand that no one gets left behind, that every life matters, regardless of whether it is convenient or profitable. "Preston Sutton has a proposal," he said. "It keeps the Cole name. It modernizes everything. You'd still be involved." "Sick animals aren't a business model, Gerald," I said. "Maybe that's the problem." The words sat between us like smoke. I thought about Alice's notebook entry from 6 weeks before she died. Bench by oak needs fixing, small things that needed attention, small things she knew I would see after she was gone. Your mother built this place for animals that no one else wanted, I said. That was the whole point. We don't turn away the ones that cost too much, or live too long, or need too much care. That's what makes this a sanctuary instead of a business. And that's why it's failing, Gerald said. Ranger was sitting by my chair. He watched Gerald the way he had watched Alice during her last months, with the steady attention of an animal who understands when something is ending. Preston's proposal keeps the mission, Gerald continued. It just makes it sustainable. You're 70 years old. You can't do this alone. I'm trying to help you. By photographing dirty cages your wife created by cutting the budget. He stopped. His expression shifted not with guilt, but with the realization that I had noticed. Marlene is trying to show investors what needs to change, he said after a moment. Investors, I repeated. Dad, this isn't 1997 anymore. We can't run a sanctuary on good intentions. I looked at him and saw the boy he had been standing at the window on his 8th birthday watching me drive away to save a dog that had been hit by a car on Highway 26. Alice had called while we were cutting the cake. A family had found the dog on the roadside still breathing and brought it to us because they knew we never said no. I left Gerald's party. I told him I would be back in an hour. I told him we would finish the birthday after I saved the dog. The surgery took 4 hours. By the time I came home, the guests were gone, and Gerald was asleep in his room. His birthday cake sat unfinished on the table. Alice said he had stood at the window for 2 hours waiting. How do you explain to your son that you did not choose the animals over him, that you chose what you had promised to do? The same promise you made him learn, that you never leave anyone behind. How do you tell him 28 years later that the lesson he learned was not the one you meant to teach? I'm not selling, I said. Gerald nodded slowly. He looked at me, the way you look at someone you have already decided cannot be saved. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. He closed the door when he left. Ranger sat by my chair watching the door for a long time after Gerald was gone, the way dogs watch doors when they know someone is not coming back the same way they left. 3 weeks after Gerald closed that door, Dr. Brent Garrison looked up from the pharmacy shelf and asked me a question I did not know how to answer. Did you approve this? I was standing in the sanctuary pharmacy doing inventory, something Alice and I had done together every Monday morning for 26 years. Ranger lay on the floor by the door watching both of us. Dr. Garrison was 45, the sanctuary's veterinarian for 12 years, the kind of doctor who showed up at midnight for emergency calls and never sent a bill when we could not pay. He held a bottle of medication in one hand and Alice's prescription log in the other. What switch? I asked. The arthritis medication for the senior dogs, he said. This isn't the prescription I wrote. This is a generic that damages kidneys over time. He handed me the bottle. The label was different from the one Alice had always ordered. The active ingredient had been changed. I didn't approve this, I said. He showed me the pharmacy receipt, the one filed 3 months ago in the medication log. Gerald's signature at the bottom. The date was mid-August, 2 weeks after Alice's oncologist told us the chemotherapy had stopped working. This isn't a budget decision. Ernest, Dr. Garrison said, his voice flat and clinical, the way doctors sound when they are working hard not to sound angry. This is negligence, or worse. I took the receipt and read it twice. The medication cost $18 less per bottle. We had 11 senior dogs on arthritis medication. The savings over 3 months would have been about $200. Alice had been dying. Gerald had signed a document that would slowly poison the animals she cared about, most the ones too old and sick for anyone else to want the ones she had built this sanctuary to protect. I put the receipt in my pocket. Old habit from the firehouse, when you do not know what evidence will matter, you keep everything. Can you write me a list of which dogs have been on this medication? I asked. Already did, Dr. Garrison said. He handed me a page with 11 names. I'm switching them back to the original prescription today, but Ernest, you need to know 3 months on, this could have caused permanent damage. I'll run blood work on all of them. I looked at the list. Ranger's name was at the top. There is a particular violence in discovering your son signed a document that would slowly poison the animals your dying wife asked you to protect, not with his fists, but with his accountant's pen 3 months before she took her last breath. Thank you, I said. Dr. Garrison left to run the blood work. I went to my truck and put the receipt and the medication bottle in the lockbox I kept under the driver's seat. the same lockbox where I had been keeping notes since Preston's whisper. Entry 73. 1 week later, Clifford Whitfield knocked on my office door. He was 65, my neighbor for 19 years, retired police chief who had moved to the house next to the sanctuary when his wife died, and never mentioned why he stayed. He came over twice a week to help with fence repairs and never asked for anything in return. He was holding a stack of printouts. You need to see this, he said. I took the papers. They were screenshots from Reddit and anonymous post in a local Portland community forum. The username was ThatcherWatcher23. The post had been up for 6 days. Old man losing control. Animals neglected. Founder mentally declining after wife's death. Someone needs to step in before these animals suffer more. There was a photo attached. I recognized it immediately, the dirty storage shed Marlene had photographed with her clipboard 4 weeks ago. I traced the account, Clifford said, sitting down across from my desk without waiting to be asked. It was created 3 weeks ago, posted from a device registered to Marlene Cole. I looked at the registration information he had printed. The device owner was listed as M. Cole, registered to the sanctuary's address. Cole was Alice's maiden name, the name the sanctuary's staff accounts were originally set up under. Marlene had used it deliberately, wanting the post to look like it came from someone inside the family bloodline, not a woman who had married into it. She used my wife's maiden name, I said. She wanted it to look like it came from inside the family, Clifford said. More credible that way. Someone concerned about their aging father-in-law, worried about the animals posting anonymously because they don't want to hurt him publicly. I read the post again. The language was careful, compassionate sounding. It painted a picture of a grieving old man who could no longer handle the responsibility he had carried for decades. It suggested intervention out of love, not cruelty. There are 43 comments, Clifford said, most of them sympathetic, a few asking if anyone has contacted animal control. I set the printouts on my desk next to Alice's notebook, the one where I had been documenting everything since Preston's whisper about wasting $12 million on unwanted dogs. How did you find this? I asked. I've been watching, Clifford said simply. Searching your name, the sanctuary's name variations. Figured if they were going to run a campaign, they'd start online where it's anonymous and spreads fast. When does a campaign stop being opportunistic and become systematic? When they photograph the dirt, when they spread the rumor, or when they register the device in your own family name to make the lie look like it came from someone who loves you. Keep watching, Clifford said, standing to leave. I'll keep tracking. Whatever they're building toward, they're not done yet. He left the printouts on my desk. Ranger had not moved from his spot by the door, watching Clifford leave the same way he had watched Gerald leave 3 weeks ago, with the quiet attention of an animal who knows when someone matters. Clifford had been my neighbor for 19 years. He never once asked me why I trusted him. He just showed up every time I needed someone to show up. I put the printouts in the lockbox with the medication bottle and Gerald's signature on the pharmacy receipt, next to the notes from Preston's whisper and the photos of Marlene's clipboard campaign. Entry 73. The evidence was building faster than I had expected. 4 days later, Silas Kendrick would arrive with his camera, and Gerald would give him a tour designed to make me look like exactly what Marlene's post claimed. 4 days after Clifford showed me the Reddit post, Silas Kendrick arrived with his camera and his notebook, and I watched my son put on a performance I had never seen him rehearse. Silas had called the day before to schedule the interview. He said Gerald had invited him back to do a follow-up piece on the sanctuary's future. I said that was fine. I did not tell him I already knew what Gerald was planning. They started the tour at the North Kennels, the ones with rusted chain link that needed replacing. Gerald walked ahead of Silas, gesturing at the fencing, his voice, carrying that particular tone of concerned disappointment that sounds compassionate until you listen to what is actually being said. My father built something remarkable here, Gerald said, pausing to let Silas take a photo of the deteriorating structure behind him. But he's living in the past. He chose the animals over everything else for years. Over family dinners, over my school events, over my mother when she was sick. Now, I'm trying to choose the sanctuary's future before it's too late. Silas wrote it down. I stood near the office doorway with Ranger at my feet watching. Gerald pointed to the storage shed Marlene had photographed weeks ago, the one with the dirty floor and the broken window. He described deferred maintenance, outdated practices, a founder who refused to adapt. Every word was true, and every word was a lie. The fence was rusted because Gerald had cut the maintenance budget. The shed was dirty because Marlene had cut the cleaning staff. The outdated practices were the same ones that kept animals alive when other shelters called them unadoptable. Gerald saw me watching. He did not look away. He just kept talking. What does it cost a man to stand in front of a camera and describe his father as incompetent, using words practiced in a mirror the night before, knowing the article will run with a photo that makes the old man look exactly as defeated as the son claimed? After 20 minutes, Silas walked over to where I was standing. "Mr. Thatcher," he said, his notebook ready. "Your son says the sanctuary needs modernization. What do you say?" I looked at Silas, then at Gerald, standing 30 feet away near the storage shed, waiting to hear what I would say that he could use against me. "Come back in a month," I said. Silas laughed, surprised. "That's not really an answer." "It will be," I said. He wrote that down too. Then he thanked me for my time, took 3 more photos of the rusted fence, and left. The article ran on Thursday. The headline read, "Animal Sanctuary Founder Resists Change as Facility Deteriorates." My photo was on the front page, standing in the doorway with Ranger beside me. I looked old in it. I suppose I was. 69 years old, gray hair, weathered face, wearing the same jacket I had worn for 15 years, because Alice said it looked good on me, and I never saw a reason to replace it. The article quoted Gerald extensively. It mentioned deferred maintenance, declining leadership, and concerns from family members who wished to remain anonymous. It made me sound like a man who had built something good, and then refused to let it evolve. Clifford called me that afternoon. He did not ask if I was all right. He just said he was watching and would let me know if anything else surfaced. 1 week later, he called again. "There were 2 men walking the perimeter this morning," Clifford said without preamble. "Measuring, taking photos of the structures. I got their plates." And I asked. "Demolition company," he said. "Sutton Pacific Realty owns it." I was sitting at Alice's desk when he told me this. Her notebook was open in front of me, the page where I had been keeping track of dates and events and signatures. Entry 84. Preston hired a demolition crew. I said, slowly, making sure I understood what Clifford was telling me. "Before the transfer contract is signed," Clifford confirmed, "before he legally owns anything. That's a hell of a lot of confidence." I wrote it down. December 14th, 2 men, demolition company, Sutton Pacific Realty. They had hired the demolition crew before they owned the land, before the contract was signed, before I had agreed to anything, the kind of certainty that only comes from knowing something I did not. "They think this is already done," I said. "Yeah," Clifford said. "Question is, why are they so sure?" I sat there after he hung up, looking at the timeline I had been building in Alice's notebook. Preston's whisper in November. Medication switch signed in August. Marlene's campaign starting in October. The Reddit post 3 weeks ago. The article last week. Now, a demolition crew measuring structures Preston did not own. The pattern was not opportunistic. It was systematic, and it was rushed. I thought about Alice's will, the one her lawyer had explained to me 6 weeks after the funeral, the trust she had established in 2019, the clause about Gerald demonstrating unwillingness to honor the sanctuary's mission, the automatic transfer of ownership and control to the trust, if that clause was triggered. Marlene had been at the will reading. She had sat in the lawyer's office with Gerald, listening to every word. She had asked questions about the trust terms, about the triggers, about what would happen if Gerald's management decisions conflicted with Alice's stated mission. The lawyer had answered them all. I sat in the truck with that realization, the demolition crew, the timeline, the rushing. Marlene knew about the trust. She had known from the beginning. She knew that if they moved slowly, if I had time to document their actions and prove they were violating Alice's mission, the trust would trigger and Gerald would lose everything. That was why they were moving fast. Not because they were impatient, because they were racing against evidence. And that changed everything about what came next. I opened the lockbox under the driver's seat and added the note about the demolition crew to the stack. Receipt for switched medication, screenshots of Reddit post, copy of the article, photos of Marlene's clipboard campaign, Preston's whisper documented in my handwriting. Entry 84. 2 days later, Serena Lancaster would stay late cleaning the warehouse and see something through an office door crack that she would photograph and send to me at 11 at night. The photograph arrived on my phone at 11 at night, a single image from Serena Lancaster with no explanation, just a company name I had never heard of, and a woman's hand I recognized signing something I could not yet read. I was sitting in the office finishing paperwork when the text came through. The image was grainy, shot through what looked like a gap in a doorway. Marlene's hand was visible in the lower right corner, her signature halfway complete on a document spread across a desk. Across from her sat a man in a dark jacket I did not recognize. The company letterhead at the top of the page read, Pacific Animal Relocation Services. Serena's text came through 15 seconds later. Mr. Thatcher, I was cleaning late. Found this. Company has history. Looked it up. Sending everything. Then 3 more messages in rapid succession, each one a screenshot of search results. Pacific Animal Relocation Services. Investigated 2019 Oregon. Mass euthanization charges. Case settled. Same company, different name. 2020. Washington. Animal cruelty investigation. Settled out of court. California, 2021. 73 animals destroyed in 12 hours. Company re-registered under new LLC structure, 2022. I sat there reading the same sentences over and over, making sure I understood what I was seeing. Serena had been cleaning the warehouse. She had stayed late the way she often did on weekends, mopping floors and organizing supplies without being asked, because she understood what it meant to care for things that needed caring for. She had seen light under Gerald's office door after hours. She had looked through the crack and seen Marlene signing a contract with a man whose company had killed animals for money in 3 states and changed its name to keep doing it. I called Serena. She answered on the first ring. Are you safe? I asked. I'm home, she said. They didn't see me. I left right after I took the photo. Good, I said. Don't come back for a few days. Tell your parents you're taking time off from volunteering. Mr. Thatcher, that contract. Es vaina de CBs. Make a decision. I know, I said. Thank you. I hung up and looked at the photo again. Marlene's signature. The date at the top of the contract, 3 weeks ago. Before Silas's article. Before the demolition crew. Before she had any legal right to sign anything on behalf of a sanctuary she did not own. There is a difference between knowing someone wants to take what you built and knowing they have already signed the contract to kill everything inside it. One is greed. The other is murder, with a corporate letterhead and a signature that matches your daughter-in-law's handwriting. I forwarded the photo and all of Serena's screenshots to Clifford with a single message, document this. Then I walked out to my truck. Ranger followed me the way he always did. He jumped into the passenger seat and settled down with his head on his paws, watching me the way dogs watch when they know something is wrong, but do not know what. I sat there with my phone in my hand. The parking lot was empty. The sanctuary was quiet except for the sounds of animals settling down for the night in the kennels behind me. I opened the photo again and zoomed in on the contract details. The text was too small to read clearly, but I could see enough. Service agreement. Timeline 30 days after transfer of ownership. Scope complete removal and relocation of all animals classified as unadoptable or medical liability. Relocation. They were not even honest enough to use the word they meant. I thought about the 73 animals in California, destroyed in 12 hours. A company that knew how to move fast, how to make living things disappear before anyone could document what had happened, before lawyers could file injunctions, before the news could arrive with cameras. Marlene had hired them 3 weeks ago. I looked at Ranger sleeping on the passenger seat. His GPS collar was blinking green in the darkness, the same collar Gerald had insisted we put on all the senior dogs 3 months ago for safety tracking. The same collar I had thought was excessive at the time, but had not questioned because Gerald said it was standard practice. The light blinked, green, steady, recording. I stared at it for 10 seconds before the realization hit. The collar had not just been tracking location, it had been recording audio for 3 weeks. Every conversation, every whisper. I had been so focused on keeping notes in my lockbox that I had forgotten what was recording itself every conversation near Ranger. Every whisper, every meeting in rooms where they thought a sleeping dog could not hear. Preston's voice in the parking lot, the land alone is worth $12 million. Don't waste it on dogs that nobody wants. Marlene's campaign in the hallway in front of staff. People donate for the animals, not for an old man who smells like wet fur. Gerald's stage performance for Silas, he's living in the past. He chose the animals over everything else for years. Every word, recorded, time-stamped. Stored on a device they had paid for and installed themselves. The collar had been recording for 3 weeks. Every whisper Preston thought I could not hear, every word Marlene said. When she thought an old dog was just furniture, every plan they made in rooms where Ranger slept. And I was not. I looked at my phone. The photo of Marlene's signature. The company that killed animals in 3 states. The The contract dated 3 weeks ago. Then I looked at Ranger's collar, blinking green in the darkness. I had been gathering evidence for 2 months, writing it down in Alice's notebook, keeping receipts in a lockbox, documenting dates and times and witnesses. But the most damning evidence had been recording itself worn around the neck of an arthritic dog they had dismissed as too old to matter. I sat in that truck until 3 in the morning, Ranger on the passenger seat collar blinking green, the photo of Marlene's signature on my phone. And the oldest question a man can ask himself, how much evidence do you need before you stop gathering it and start using it? 4 days later, I would find the answer in a storage room, holding a clipboard with 23 names written in red ink, and Ranger's name would be the last one on the list. 4 days after sitting in that truck, asking myself when to stop gathering evidence, I found the clipboard in the storage room, and the answer became irrelevant, because the last name on the list was written in red ink, and it was Ranger's. I had gone to the storage room looking for Alice's medical files, the ones documenting the elderly dog's care protocols she had established over 26 years. The clipboard was sitting on top of the filing cabinet face up, as if someone had left it there knowing I would find it. The header read, Resource Reallocation Assessment. Below that, 23 names. I recognized everyone. Bella the Blind Shepherd mix. Alice had bottle-fed in 2019 when she arrived half-starved. Remove. Samson, the 3-legged retriever who greeted every visitor at the gate. Remove. Duke, the 16-year-old cat with kidney disease who slept in the sun by the office window. Remove. I read each name, one by one. Dogs who had been here for years. Cats who were blind. Animals Alice had fed by hand during their final months. Each one with the word remove in red marker beside their name, followed by a clinical description. Low adoption value, medical liability, terminal condition, behavioral issues. 22 names. And then the last one, Ranger 11 years, arthritic, low adoption value. I put the clipboard down on the filing cabinet. I sat on the storage floor, my back against the file shelf. Ranger was in the doorway watching me, his head tilted the way dogs tilt their heads when they know something is wrong but do not know what. For the first time in this entire sequence of discoveries, I did not know what to do next. Ranger had slept next to Alice's chair every night for 11 years, watched her die, watched me cry, never left my side through every moment of grief, and they had given him a number and a red marker and the word remove, as if those 11 years of loyalty were worth exactly nothing. I sat there for 20 minutes. Then I stood up, picked up the clipboard, and walked to the meeting room, where I knew Gerald and Marlene would be reviewing the week's financials with the staff. It was afternoon. 5 staff members were present sitting around the conference table with laptops and spreadsheets. Gerald was standing at the head of the table, pointing to a budget projection on the screen. Marlene sat in the corner with her phone checking messages. I walked in and placed the clipboard in the center of the table. "Whose list is this?" I asked. The room went quiet. The staff members looked at the clipboard, then at me, then at Gerald. Marlene's expression did not change. She looked up from her phone with the calm, measured attention of someone who had been expecting this moment. "It's a resource allocation assessment," she said evenly. "It has my dog's name on it," I said, with the word remove. Gerald set down the budget report he had been holding. He looked at the clipboard, then at Marlene, then back at me. "Dad," he said carefully, "we have to make hard decisions." "They're hard decisions," I repeated. The staff members were not moving. No one was looking at their laptops anymore. Everyone was watching me. "These are animals Alice saved," I said, my voice still level, but getting louder. "Every single one of these names. She fed them. She medicated them. She sat with them when they were dying because no one else would." "And that's exactly the problem," Marlene said, her tone still perfectly controlled. "This sanctuary cannot survive if it continues to function as hospice care for animals with no adoption potential." "Adoption potential," I said. I could feel something breaking loose inside me, the control I had maintained through 2 months of discovering betrayal after betrayal, the discipline I had learned in 28 years of staying calm in burning buildings while people screamed. "You put Ranger on a list," I said, my voice rising. "The dog who slept next to my dying wife for 11 months. The dog who has not left my side since the funeral. You wrote remove next to his name like he was a broken tool you were throwing away." Gerald started to speak. I did not let him. "This place was built to save lives," I said, and I slammed my hand on the table hard enough that the clipboard jumped. Not to erase what rich people don't want to see, the staff members pulled back from the table. One of them stood up. Marlene did not move. She was holding her phone up, pointed at me. Recording. You built this sanctuary with good intentions, Marlene said calmly, still recording. But you're not capable of managing it anymore. This outburst proves it. She had been recording me, not because I was making a scene, but because she had created the scene specifically to record it, the way you set a stage before you invite the audience to watch someone fall apart on cue. The clipboard had been left on top of the filing cabinet deliberately. She had known I would find it. She had known I would confront them. She had been ready with her phone, waiting for me to lose control in front of witnesses. I looked at Gerald. He was staring at the table, not meeting my eyes. You knew about this, I said to him. He did not answer. I picked up the clipboard and walked out of the meeting room. Ranger followed me. Behind me, I heard Marlene saying something to the staff about stress and grief and declining judgment, her voice still perfectly calm, still recording. I went to my truck and sat in the driver's seat. Ranger jumped into the passenger seat beside me, his collar blinking green, still recording. Everything. I had gathered evidence for 2 months, documents, photos, testimonies, recordings I had not even known existed. And in 30 seconds of losing my temper, Marlene had gathered evidence that I was exactly what she had been claiming all along. She was smiling at her phone screen while recording me. Not a big smile, just the corner of her mouth. The kind of smile that means you got what you came for. That night, Gerald would come home to find Marlene showing him the video, and she would give him an ultimatum that forced him to choose between his father and everything else he thought he wanted. 2 days after I lost my composure on camera, Clifford sent me photographs of my son sitting in a restaurant with Preston Sutton, and on the table between them was a sketch with my family's name erased and replaced with something that sounded like money. But before those photographs arrived, there was a conversation I did not witness. Clifford told me about it later because he had been watching Gerald's house that night. Marlene had shown Gerald the video in their living room. Gerald on the couch, Marlene standing with her phone held out like evidence. "This is our proof," she said. "Mental instability. We file for guardianship." "He's not mentally ill, Marlene," Gerald said. "He was angry." "It doesn't matter what he is. It matters what it looks like on video." Silence. Then Marlene delivered her ultimatum. "Either your father leaves or I do. And if I leave, I take the Preston Sutton deal with me." Clifford said Gerald sat very still, staring at the floor. Then he said one word. "Fine." When does a childhood wound stop being a memory and become a reason when you're 8? Watching your father choose a bleeding dog over your birthday cake, or when you're 38, watching your wife give you an ultimatum and realizing you have been waiting your entire life for permission to choose something other than him. I did not know about that conversation yet. What I knew was this 2 days later, Clifford followed Gerald to a restaurant in suburban Bend and photographed him with Preston Sutton. The photographs arrived on my phone at 2 in the afternoon. 6 images showing Gerald and Preston leaning over architectural plans. Coffee cups pushed aside, Preston pointing, Gerald nodding. I zoomed in on the sketch. A resort, pool with infinity edge, pet spa with climate-controlled suites, luxury accommodations with amenities listed in elegant script gourmet, pet meals, massage, therapy, behavioral enrichment. Room rates $2,800 per week. At the top, where Thatcher Ridge Animal Sanctuary had been written on every sign for 26 years, there was now Silver Pines Luxury Pet Resort by Sutton Pacific. They had erased us. Not just the mission, not just the animals. The name Alice and I had chosen together in 1997 when we buried our savings into land. Nobody else wanted gone, replaced with something expensive that meant nothing. I sat in my truck staring at the photographs, Ranger in the passenger seat collar blinking green. I thought about Alice painting that sign by hand in our driveway, 7 months pregnant with Gerald, saying the name mattered because it was a promise. Thatcher Ridge, our family's commitment. Gerald had signed it away for a resort that charged more per week than most people in this county made in a month. There is a particular violence in seeing your family name erased from the thing you built with your dying wife's last savings, replaced with words that cost $2,800 a week and mean absolutely nothing to anyone who ever slept in a kennel because they had nowhere else to go. I looked at the photograph. Gerald's face in profile smiling. Not big, just the slight upturn at the corner of his mouth that meant he was pleased. The same smile from when he was 12 and won a debate arguing a position he did not believe. The same smile when he graduated business school and told me he was going to make real money, not nonprofit money. The smile that meant he had won something. I forwarded the photographs to my lockbox file. Entry 107. How much evidence do you need before you stop gathering it and start using it? I had documentation of medication switches, screenshots of smear campaigns, photos of demolition crews, a destruction contract, a list with my dog's name marked for removal. Now photographs of my son erasing my family's name. I opened the glove compartment. Inside was a business card I had kept for 4 years. The edges were soft from being handled once when it arrived. Leora Brennan, attorney at law. I had not spoken to Leora in 4 years. The last time I saw her, she was 27 and had just passed the bar. She had been a sanctuary volunteer for 14 years. Before that, since she was 13, showing up every weekend to clean kennels and never asking for anything, except to be allowed to keep coming back. When she graduated law school, she sent me a card. It said if I ever needed help, she would be there. I had put it in the glove compartment and never called, because I had not needed help then. I needed it now. I held the card, Leora's phone number printed in small text at the bottom. I had memorized it 4 years ago, without meaning to. Ranger shifted in the passenger seat. His collar blinked green. Still recording. I took out my phone and typed Leora's number. My thumb hovered over the call button. The next day, Dolores Ashford would walk into a coffee shop near the sanctuary, carrying 18 months of financial records, and the number she would tell me was larger than I had imagined possible. The next day, Dolores Ashford told me a number $340,000, and for a moment, I could not process what that number meant, only that it was larger than I had allowed myself to imagine possible. We were sitting in a coffee shop 2 blocks from the sanctuary. Dolores was 58, the sanctuary's former accountant who had worked with Alice and me for 14 years, before Gerald forced her out 2 years ago, citing budget restructuring. She had kept every financial record from her time there, and had been quietly watching the sanctuary's public filings ever since. She slid a folder across the table. Inside were 18 months of donation statements, bank transfers, and invoices. He's been moving money since Alice got sick, Dolores said. Small amounts at first, then larger. The total is $340,000 over 14 months. I looked at the numbers. The dates matched Alice's diagnosis in August of the previous year, her treatments through the fall, her final weeks in June. Where did it go? I asked. Personal accounts registered under his name, Dolores said. Some of it went to Marlene's consulting firm for services never rendered. Some went to vendors I've never heard of. I traced a few shell companies that don't have addresses or employees. I turned pages, line items, transfer dates, account numbers. The handwriting in the margins was Alice's from before she got too sick to review the books herself. She had been meticulous. She had trusted Gerald to continue that meticulousness. There's more, Dolores said. He's been billing fictitious vet invoices, vendors that don't exist, equipment that was never purchased. How much more? I asked. The fictitious billing adds another $60,000. $400,000 total, stolen while Alice was dying. Dolores slid another folder across the table. This one was thinner. There's one more thing, she said. Her voice was quieter now. The donation fund Alice set up for senior animals, the one she named after your daughter Gerald, closed it last month. He told the donors it had been merged with operations. It wasn't merged. It was emptied. I opened the folder. Inside was the closure notice Gerald had sent to the fund's donors. Polite language about operational efficiency and consolidated giving. The fund had held $87,000 when Alice died. The closure statement showed a balance of 0. There is a kind of theft that goes beyond money when someone steals from a fund your dying wife created to honor the daughter you buried together when they tell the donors it was merged, but really it was emptied when they turn your family's grief into line items in a ledger that benefits no one but themselves. Alice had named that fund after our daughter Margaret, who we lost when she was 6 years old to leukemia, 24 years ago. Alice had turned that grief into something that saved other lives, funding care for animals that were old and sick, the way Margaret had been old beyond her years, and sick beyond what any child should ever be. Gerald had closed it and taken the money. And thank you, I said to Dolores. What are you going to do? She asked. I don't know yet, I said. But I did know. I just was not ready to say it out loud. 3 days later, Serena sent me a video. She had hidden her phone in the old dog kennel propped behind a bag of food on the supply shelf where it could record without being seen. The video showed Marlene talking to a new employee. I did not recognize someone young who had started the week before. Marlene was explaining the sanctuary's new operational philosophy. Dead animals don't need food, she said in the same casual tone she used to order coffee. And the donors don't come to see old dogs. They come to feel good about themselves. Give them puppies. Get rid of the rest. The new employee nodded, writing notes. We're implementing this in phases, Marlene continued. Phase 1 starts after the first of the year. We'll call it resource reallocation. The public messaging will be about modernization and efficiency. But internally, you need to understand this is about removing liabilities. How do we remove them? The employee asked. We have a service company lined up, Marlene said. They handle it quietly. The donors never need to know. We just tell them the animals were transferred to partner facilities for specialized care. Serena's text came with the video link. Recorded this afternoon. Uploaded to cloud. Can't be deleted. Thought you should know what she says when she thinks nobody's listening. I sat in my truck and watched the video 3 times. Not because I needed to see it again, because I wanted to remember exactly how she sounded when she said it. The tone was what ended it for me. Not anger, not calculation. Just the same casual inflection she used, ordering a latte, as if dead animals and old dogs and getting rid of the rest were menu items she was discussing with completely neutral efficiency. I had been gathering evidence for 3 months. I had been asking myself when to stop gathering and start using it. I had been trying to give Gerald chances to choose differently, to remember who his mother was, to remember what this place meant. But Marlene's voice on that video saying, dead animals don't need food, with the tone of someone discussing weather, ended all of that. I forwarded the video to Clifford. Then I sent it to Leora with a message I had been composing in my head for 4 years. I need help. Can we talk? She called me back in 3 minutes. 2 days later, I would sit in my truck with a hard case containing everything, the medication samples, the financial statements, the photos, the videos, and for the last time, ask myself the question I had been asking since Preston's whisper. When do you stop gathering evidence and start using it? 2 nights before, they took everything I sat in my truck and made an inventory of what I had gathered, not possessions, but evidence, and understood for the first time that Alice had been preparing for this fight years before I knew there would be one. The hard case sat on the passenger seat beside Ranger, who was sleeping with his head on his paws. Inside medication samples Dr. Garrison had pulled from the pharmacy shelf. Financial statements Dolores had given me, showing funds redirected and stolen. Photos Clifford had taken of Gerald with Preston of demolition, crews measuring property of architectural sketches, with our name erased. Videos Serena had recorded of Marlene's casual cruelty. Notes from every conversation, every threat, every moment, since Preston's first whisper about wasting land on unwanted dogs. 3 months of evidence, 147 entries in Alice's notebook. I picked up Alice's will from the stack of documents Leora had sent me after our phone call. I had read it once at the lawyer's office 6 weeks after the funeral, sitting next to Gerald, while the attorney explained the trust provisions. I had not understood then what I was hearing. I understood now. I read the trust clause again carefully this time. In the event that Thatcher Ridge Animal Sanctuary is converted to commercial use or demonstrates unwillingness to honor its stated mission, all ownership rights shall revert to the Alice Cole Animal Preservation Trust. The designated trust attorney is Leora Brennan upon reaching legal age of practice. Alice had written Leora's name into this document in 2019 when Leora was 26 and had just passed the bar. But Alice had known about Leora since she was 13, since the night I came home and told my wife about finding a girl sleeping in Kennel 3 because she had nowhere else to go. Alice had never met Leora. She had only heard me talk about her once, but she had remembered. She had put that girl's name into legal protection for the sanctuary we had built together, planning for a betrayal I never saw coming. That was the thing about Alice she always saw, further than the rest of us saw betrayal before it arrived, and built protection before it was needed. Loved so fiercely that even dying could not stop her from trying to save what we had made together from the people who would destroy it. I attached a backup camera to Ranger's collar, old firehouse habit. When you do not know which evidence will matter, you document everything. The next morning, they came at 5:30. I was already awake sitting in the truck in the parking lot when I saw headlights turn into the back entrance. Pacific Animal Relocation Services. The company Serena had photographed on Marlene's contract, the one investigated in 3 states for mass euthanization. They had brought cages, transfer papers, a list of 23 names. I got out of the truck. Ranger followed me. We walked to the back enclosure, where the truck had parked, its engine still running, exhaust visible in the cold December air. I stood in front of the gate, put my hand on Ranger's head. "Nobody takes them while I'm still standing here," I said. The driver looked at me, then at his phone, then back at me. He did not move. That was when Marlene arrived, filming with her phone held up like she was documenting evidence for a case she had already won. "Look at this," she said to the camera, her voice calm and clinical. "An old man hugging a sick dog in the dark and screaming at a truck. Is this the person you want running this facility?" Gerald's car pulled in behind hers. He got out, slowly walked over to where I was standing. He looked tired. He looked like he had not slept. "Hey, Dad," as he said. "You're really doing this?" I said. "You chose them over us for years," Gerald said quietly. "Now, I'm choosing my family." He held out his hand. I knew what he wanted. The sanctuary keys. The ones Alice and I had carried for 26 years, the ones that opened every gate and kennel and storage room in the place we had built with our own hands. I gave them to him. He took them without looking at me and walked to the back gate, unlocked it. The truck driver started moving cages. Marlene went inside the office and came back with a bag. My clothes, Alice's notebook. She threw the bag on the front porch. "Let's take your smell with you," she said, "and take the dog that scares donors. You can both sleep outside." I stood in the yard holding the bag and Ranger's leash. The founder picture Alice had framed and hung in the office window was already gone, replaced with nothing. I had been a firefighter for 28 years, and I had walked into fires that other men walked away from. And the trick was never to stop the fire. The trick was to know where it was going, before it got there, to understand every exit before you needed one. "You just locked me out of the place I built," I said. "But you never understood it wasn't yours to lock." Marlene kept filming. Gerald did not look up. I walked to my truck, put Ranger on the passenger seat, put the bag in the back, sat behind the wheel for a long time, watching the sun come up over the sanctuary gates, over the sign Alice had painted that still read, "Thatcher Ridge," even though everything inside had been taken. Then I opened the glove box and took out Leora Brennan's card. What I did not know yet was that she had been waiting for this call for 4 years, and the soup she would bring me 2 days later would taste like the first meal that meant I was not alone anymore. I sat in that truck for 2 days without eating, and on every page of Alice's notebook, I read her handwriting, describing animals I had failed to protect, until I reached the last thing she ever wrote and understood she had been protecting me even as she died. I did not drive far from the sanctuary, 3 miles to a public parking lot where trucks could sit overnight without being questioned. Ranger slept on the passenger seat. I sat with Alice's notebook open on my lap. Every page was her handwriting, 26 years of documentation. Each animal that came through our gates, she had written down their arrival, their condition, their care. I read them out loud to Ranger, one entry at a time. Received October 12th, 1998. Name, Shadow. Condition, blind left eye, malnourished. Notes, will not eat from hand, yet needs time. Received March 3rd, 2001. Name, Bella. Condition, 3 legs. Heartworm positive. Notes, surgery scheduled. Foster family interested if recovery successful. Every animal, every name, every date. Her careful notes about what they needed, what they ate, whether they were scared or trusting. I read for hours. I did not eat. I did not sleep well. I just read. On the second day, I reached the last entry written 3 days before she died. Ranger ate well today. Ernest looks tired. Tell him the bench by the oak tree needs fixing. He'll know which one. I read it 3 times. The bench by the oak tree. I knew which one. The bench where she used to sit with her coffee and her notebook, writing about the animals we saved. She had known she was dying. She had known I would be tired. She had left me a note about something that needed fixing, something small and manageable, as if she understood I would need tasks I could complete when everything else felt impossible. I put the notebook down. Ranger rested his head on my lap. I sat like that until it was dark. There is a difference between being strong and being unable to break strength, is choosing when to stand. And for 2 days in that truck, I chose to stop standing, to sit with my dog and my dead wife's handwriting, and allow myself to understand that everything I had built was gone, and I did not know if I could build it again. This was the first time I allowed myself to collapse. Not plan, not document, just break. Before I tell you who knocked on that truck window on the second night, if you're still with me, comment whether you would have kept fighting at this point or accepted the loss. Add 1 reason, 5 to 10 words. Please note what follows includes some recreated details for storytelling purposes, but the lesson is what I hope stays with you, because what comes next changes everything. The knock came at 8 o'clock on the second night. I looked up. A woman stood outside the truck window holding a thermos and a bag. Dark hair, blue jacket. She looked familiar, but I could not place her. I rolled down the window. "Mr. Thatcher," she said. "My name is Leora Brennan. Clifford called me. I brought soup. It's tomato. I didn't know if you'd eaten." Leora Brennan, 31 years old, a non-profit attorney with dark hair and a blue jacket holding soup. The girl I had saved 18 years ago, when she was 13 and sleeping in the kennel, now arriving exactly when I needed someone to save me. "Leora Brennan," I said. "You were 13. I was," she said. "You fed me for 3 weeks and called social services and never asked for anything. Now, I'm a nonprofit attorney, and I think you need one." Ranger lifted his head and sniffed her hand through the window. He did not growl. He just sniffed once, then settled back down. "Can I sit with you?" she asked. I unlocked the door. She climbed into the back seat with the thermos and the bread bag. She poured soup into the thermos cap and handed it to me. It was hot. It tasted like the first meal that meant something in 2 days. When someone brings you food after you have not eaten for 2 days, when they knock on a truck window in the dark and offer soup without asking why you need it, when they remember being fed 18 years ago and show up to return what they were given, that is not charity, that is the covenant Alice believed in and built her entire life around. "Clifford told me what happened," Leora said. "The eviction, the list with your dog's name on it, the financial records Dolores found. He said you might need legal help." "I don't have money for a lawyer," I said. "I'm not here for money," Leora said. "I'm here because you kept me alive when I was 13 and had nowhere to go, and because your wife wrote my name into a legal document when I was that age." I looked at her. "What document?" I asked. "The Alice Cole Animal Preservation Trust," Leora said. "Your wife established it in 2019. There's a clause that triggers if the sanctuary is converted to commercial use or demonstrates unwillingness to honor its mission. When that happens, all ownership rights revert to the trust." "And I know about the trust," I said. The lawyer read it at the will hearing. "Did he read the part about the designated trust attorney?" Leora asked. I shook my head. "Your wife wrote my name into it," Leora said. "When I was 27 years old, a child she had never met. She only heard about me from you once on a night when you came home and told her about a girl you found sleeping in the kennel because she had nowhere else to go." I stared at her. "Alice remembered," I said. "She remembered," Leora confirmed, "and she planned ahead. That was the thing about Alice, she always saw further than the rest of us. She stayed in that truck for 2 hours. She told me about the trust. She told me Alice had written her name into it when Leora was 13 years old, a child Alice had never met, a child whose name she had only heard from me once. Alice had remembered. Alice had planned ahead. The next morning, we would drive to her office in Portland, and she would open the file that would change everything the trust clause Alice had hidden in plain sight, waiting for the exact betrayal that had just occurred. The next morning in Leora's office in Portland, she opened Alice's will file on her laptop and read aloud the clause that would change everything. In the event that Thatcher Ridge Animal Sanctuary is converted to commercial use or animal capacity, falls below 60% of established baseline, all ownership rights shall revert automatically to the Alice Thatcher Animal Preservation Trust. She paused, scrolling down through the legal language. "The designated trust attorney is Leora Brennan upon reaching legal age of practice." Another pause. She looked at me across the desk. "She wrote my name in here when I was 13, Leora said. She had never met me. She just knew. I was sitting in the chair across from her desk. Ranger was on the floor beside me. We had driven to Portland that morning, parked in the garage beneath her office building, and taken the elevator to the 3rd floor. "What does this mean?" I asked. "Legally." "It means if Gerald converts the sanctuary to commercial use, or if the animal capacity drops below 60% of what Alice established as baseline, the trust automatically activates," Leora said. "No court approval needed, no probate. It just reverts. And as designated trust attorney, I have authority to enforce it." "Has he converted it?" I asked. "Not yet," Leora said. "But has he reduced capacity below 60%? She looked at her computer screen, then at me. "That's what we need to find out." Clifford knocked on the door 20 minutes later. He came in carrying a folder. "Gerald signed a capacity reduction plan last month." Clifford said, setting the folder on Leora's desk. Budget justification, filed with the state for nonprofit operational restructuring. He brought the operation down to 58% of established baseline. I stared at the document, Gerald's signature at the bottom, dated 4 weeks ago. He triggered the trust himself, I said. Without knowing it, Leora confirmed. Yes. When does incompetence become justice? When the man trying to destroy your life's work signs the document that legally strips his own authority, when greed becomes so blind it cannot read the clauses written by the woman he claimed to love, when the trap springs, not because you said it, but because he walked into it trying to save money on the animals his mother died protecting. Alice always saw further. She had built the trap. She had set the threshold at exactly 60%. And Gerald had walked into it trying to cut costs, never reading the legal documents his mother had filed years before his greed began. What do we do now? I asked. We file for enforcement, Leora said. But that takes time. Weeks, maybe months. They'll fight it. They'll claim the capacity reduction was temporary, that they're rebuilding the population, that the trust clause doesn't apply. So we need to force their hand, Clifford said. Leora nodded. I'm filing an emergency application to freeze all sanctuary donation funds while the investigation is ongoing, she said. Dolores's financial statements are enough for prima facie evidence of elder financial abuse. If the judge approves the freeze, Gerald and Marlene can't access the money. That forces them to move faster than they want to. How fast? I asked. Fast enough to make mistakes, Leora said. 2 days later, the judge approved the freeze. Gerald received the notification via email at 4 in the afternoon. I know because Clifford was monitoring his accounts the way he had been monitoring everything for 3 months. Marlene called Preston within the hour. Clifford played me the recording later. He had been monitoring calls made from the sanctuary's main office line, the one Marlene used for business, the one registered under the sanctuary's non-profit account. Oregon's one-party consent law, applied Ernest as the line's account holder, had authorized the monitoring in writing when Clifford asked. It wasn't wiretapping, it was documentation, essential evidence. The gala is in 11 days, Marlene said on the recording, her voice tight with controlled anger. If we announce the deal publicly before the investigation concludes, it's harder to legally reverse. We need to accelerate the timeline. Are you sure? Preston's voice asked. We announce at the gala, Marlene said. As planned, 11 days. Then we announce at the gala, Preston confirmed. As planned. I sat in Leora's office listening to the recording. 11 days. They think that's enough time, I said. They think they're ahead of us, Leora said. They don't know we have the trust trigger. They don't know Dolores documented everything. They don't know Clifford has been recording them for weeks. And they don't know Serena, Clifford added. I looked at him. What about Serena? I asked. She's been volunteering at the gala venue, Clifford said, setting up AV equipment. The venue coordinator asked for volunteers from local nonprofits. Serena signed up. She's been inside twice this week. They had 11 days, and they thought that was enough time to announce a deal at a gala before an investigation could stop them, not knowing that a 17-year-old girl had already been inside the venue twice that week with her phone and her quiet determination to film everything they tried to hide. What's she setting up? I asked. Whatever we need her to set up, Clifford said. Leora opened a new file on her laptop. Inside were photos Serena had sent. The gala ballroom, the main screen, the AV control booth, the schedule for the evening. Preston is speaking at 7:30, Leora said. Introducing the Silver Pines partnership. Gerald and Marlene will be on stage with him. 300 donors in the audience. 300 witnesses, I said. Exactly, Leora said. We had the trust. We had the trigger. We had the evidence. What we needed now was a room full of people who would watch it happen in real time. Preston Sutton was going to give us exactly that. Over the next week, I would stay at Leora's house, preparing the final confrontation, while Clifford, Dolores, Dr. Garrison, and Serena each moved their pieces into position for the night. Everything would either collapse or be saved. Leora's guest room smelled like lavender and old books. Ranger slept on a folded quilt beside the bed, his breathing steady for the first time in days. I stayed at her house in Portland for the week leading up to the gala. She had offered on the second night when we sat in my truck eating soup, and I had accepted because I had nowhere else to go and because sleeping in a guest bed felt less like charity when it came from someone whose life I had once helped save. Every evening we sat at her kitchen table, Files spread across the worn oak surface, her laptop open, coffee and chipped mugs, planning. On the fourth night past midnight, Leora looked up from the evidence files and asked the question I had been avoiding. "Why did you wait?" she said. "You could have used the trust clause months ago. Alice gave you that protection in 2019. You've known about it since the will reading." I looked at the photos she had printed and placed on the table. Gerald and me at the sanctuary's opening in 1997, 27 years younger, his arm around my shoulders, both of us smiling at something Alice had said off camera. I wanted to see if he would choose differently, I said. The rain drummed on the window. Ranger's paws twitched in his sleep, chasing something in a dream. Alice would have wanted me to give him every chance, I continued. She loved him. Even when she wrote that trust clause, even when she planned for this exact betrayal, she still loved him. She still hoped he'd choose the sanctuary over the money. Leora was quiet for a long time. "So you waited," she said, and gathered evidence, and gave him chances. I gave him chances, I confirmed. Every time he made a choice, I waited to see if the next one would be different. I kept hoping. And now I'm done hoping, I said. Leora's kitchen at 1 a.m, coffee gone cold in chipped mugs, Ranger's paws twitching in dream chase rain, on the window like fingers drumming, my hands flat on the table beside Alice's handwritten, will dated 2019, 5 years before she died, every word in her precise architect's lettering. In the event my son demonstrates unwillingness to honor this sanctuary's mission, she knew, even then she knew. On the 7th day, I made phone calls. 12 former volunteers who had left the sanctuary over the past 2 years when Gerald cut their positions. 3 allied animal shelters who had taken transfers from us before. I asked them all the same question: could they take animals, on short notice elderly and sick ones that needed specialized care? They all said yes. 3 nights before the gala at 2 a.m, I drove to the sanctuary. I had called the volunteers earlier that day, told them to meet me at the back gate, bring vans, bring carriers, be quiet. I still had the back gate code, the one Alice and I had set in 1997. Gerald had never changed it. He had never thought to ask what codes existed beyond the main entrance. I parked 3 blocks away and walked to the gate with Ranger. The vans were already there, engines off waiting in the darkness. I entered the code. The gate unlocked with a soft click. We moved in silence. 12 volunteers, 4 shelter directors, 23 animals on the remove list. Bella, the blind shepherd, Samson, the 3-legged retriever, Duke, the 16-year-old cat. Every name I had read on that clipboard, we found their kennels and carried them out. Ranger walked beside me the whole time, as if he understood what we were doing and why it had to be done in darkness. 3 hours, no talking. Just the quiet efficiency of people who knew how to handle scared animals and move quickly. By 5 a.m, all 23 were gone, transferred to 4 different shelters across Oregon, each one equipped to handle elderly animals with medical needs. I stood in the empty kennels afterward, just me and Ranger and the silence. Ranger's old pen with the carved name plaque Alice had made, the water bowl still half full. I did not feel triumph or vindication, just the bone-deep exhaustion of a man who spent months hoping he was wrong about his own son, and the quiet relief of knowing 23 animals would wake up tomorrow in places where no one had a remove list. Marlene arrived at 7. Clifford was parked across the street. He had been watching the sanctuary since 6, waiting for her morning inspection. He sent me the video later that day. Marlene walking through the kennels, stopping, looking around, her face changing as she realized what she was seeing. Not sick animals, not old dogs, nothing. Empty cages, empty water bowls, empty. I watched the video once. Her face, the rage, the helplessness. The moment she understood that someone had moved faster than she planned, that someone had taken the animals she intended to kill and put them somewhere she could not reach. Then I deleted the file. I did not save it. I did not need it. The animals were safe. That was all that mattered. Marlene could rage at empty kennels all she wanted. She could call Gerald. She could call Preston. She could try to trace where the animals had gone. But they were gone, and I was the only one who knew where. That evening back at Leora's house, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The text message was 3 words. Saturday, the gala, bring everything. I stared at the screen, then a second message arrived. A photo. Marlene and Preston outside a downtown office building, her hand on his arm, both of them laughing. The timestamp said yesterday 4 in the afternoon. A third message. She doesn't know I was there. We need to talk before Saturday. Meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m., Pioneer Square. The sender's name appeared at the top of the thread. Silas Kendrick, the same reporter who had written the hit piece about me 6 weeks ago. The article with my photo on the front page describing me as a founder, resisting change while the facility deteriorated. Now he was sending me photos of Marlene and Preston. Now he wanted to meet. I showed the messages to Leora. He switched sides, she said. Or he's setting a trap, I said. Only one way to find out, Leora said. I looked at the photo again, Marlene's hand on Preston's arm, both of them laughing. The gala was in 2 days. We had the trust, we had the trigger, we had the evidence, we had the animals safe. What we needed now was someone with a camera and a newspaper who would tell the truth. Silas Kendrick was offering exactly that. The USB drive sat between 2 cold coffees, black plastic, no bigger than my thumb, labeled in Sharpie Marlene Thatcher. Unfiltered. Silas Kendrick waited at a corner table in the Pioneer Square coffee shop, looking like he had not slept since writing the hit piece 6 weeks ago. Dark circles under his eyes, rumpled clothes, 2 coffees already ordered, both gone cold while he sat there checking his watch. I sat down across from him. Ranger settled at my feet. Thank you for coming, Silas said. I did not say anything. I just looked at the USB drive. I've been writing the wrong story, Silas said. She played me and I let her because it was easy. She gave me quotes. She gave me access. She made it sound like she was the concerned family member trying to save a failing sanctuary from a stubborn old man who couldn't let go. And you believed her, I said. I didn't verify, Silas said. That's the part I can't fix. I should have called you. I should have checked the financials. I should have asked why all the veteran staff had quit in the last 2 years. I didn't. I just wrote what she told me to write. He pushed the USB drive across the table. This is everything she told me off the record, he said. Recordings from our meetings, notes she gave me that she said weren't for publication. She called the animals expensive dead weight. She said Gerald needed to finally act like a CEO instead of his mother's son. She told me the removal list was resource optimization. I picked up the drive. Why are you giving this to me? I asked. Because I watched her live stream this morning, Silas said. And I saw the comments, and I realized I'd been writing propaganda for someone who was planning to kill 23 animals for budget reasons. He looked at me directly for the first time. What do you want the public to know before Saturdays? He asked. Tell them what the sanctuary was built for, I said, not what they wanted to turn it into. I left the coffee shop with the USB drive in my pocket. At 11:30 that morning, Marlene started a live stream from the sanctuary. Leora called me. You need to see this. I watched on her laptop. Marlene standing in the empty kennel's phone, held up addressing the camera with practiced concern. My husband's father has stolen 23 animals that belong to this sanctuary. She said to 12,000 viewers. Animals that were under our care that we were responsible for, taken in the middle of the night without authorization. The viewer count climbed, 12,000, 13,000. Then the comments started. Serena Lancaster posted a link. Video clip, Marlene's voice, dead animals don't need food, Gerald. They need disposal. Dolores Ashford posted a PDF, bank statements. $340,000 highlighted in yellow. Gerald Thatcher's name on every transfer. I watched Marlene's live stream on Leora's laptop, volume muted. Her mouth moved accusations, justifications, victim posture, but all I saw was the empty kennel behind her, the one with Ranger's old name plaque that Alice carved in 2019. I didn't feel anger. I felt the quiet finality of watching someone destroy themselves on camera while 12,000 strangers bore witness. The viewer count started dropping. 12,000, 11,000, 8,000. Marlene noticed. She looked at her phone screen confused. She started reading the comments aloud, trying to defend herself, but that only made more people leave. The live stream ended at 15 minutes. 4,000 viewers left. Silas's article went live at 6 that evening. The headline, The Real Story of Thatcher Ridge, How a Son Betrayed His Mother's Legacy. Leora read it aloud from her phone while I sat at her kitchen table. Every document we had given him. Every video Serena had recorded. Every bank statement Dolores had provided, the destruction contract, the remove list, photos of the animals Marlene had wanted to kill. He didn't hold back, Leora said. Every document, every video, every dollar. The article had embedded media. You could click and watch Marlene saying, "Dead animals don't need food," in her casual coffee ordering tone. You could download the bank statements showing the embezzled funds. You could see the remove list with 23 names written in red marker. By 8 o'clock, hashtag Save Thatcher Ridge was trending. At 10, Leora showed me her phone. Number 7 in Oregon, number 43 nationally. Hundreds of comments from strangers defending Alice's vision, condemning the embezzlement, offering donations to help me rebuild. People I had never met fighting for a place they had never seen. I thought, Alice, they heard you. Across 27 years and one viral article, they finally heard what you were trying to build. At 11 that night, my phone rang. Gerald's name on the screen. I almost did not answer. I stared at it for 3 rings. Then I picked up. "Oh, hello," I said. Silence. Just breathing on the other end. Then Gerald's voice, quieter than I had heard in years. "Dad?" Not Ernest, not father, just Dad. 5 seconds of silence. I waited. I did not fill the gap. I gave him space to say whatever came next. The call ended. No explanation, no apology, no question. Just that one word hanging in the air and the dial tone that followed. I set the phone down on the kitchen table. Leora was watching me from across the room. "What did he say?" she asked. "It, Dad," I said. "Just that." "What does that mean?" "I don't know," I said. But I knew what it meant. It meant something had cracked. It meant the article had reached him. It meant seeing his mother's name in a headline about betrayal had broken through whatever wall Marlene had built between us. It meant he was not ready to apologize. But he was not ready to keep fighting either. The gala was in less than 2 days. Saturday evening, 6 o'clock. Gerald had called. He had said one word. Then he had hung up. And I had no idea if that word meant he was coming to the gala to stand beside Marlene and Preston, or if it meant he was finally choosing differently. Serena's hands didn't shake when she plugged the USB into the venue's central AV system 2 hours before 300 people would arrive, expecting champagne and philanthropy. I watched from the truck as she walked out of the Riverside Convention Center at 4:15, her borrowed technical volunteer uniform already stripped off and stuffed in her backpack. She'd borrowed it from a friend who actually worked venue setup. Same height, same build, same confident stride that made you assume she belonged anywhere she walked. She climbed into the passenger seat. "It's done. 45 minutes after they start. No one can stop it." "You're sure about the timing?" "The system runs on military precision." She pulled out her phone, showed me the screenshot she'd taken of the AV interface. 6:45 p.m. exactly. Autoplay trigger priority override. Even if someone unplugs the laptop, the backup system kicks in. Ranger shifted in the back seat, his head resting against my shoulder. I'd brought him because I couldn't leave him at the house, not tonight. Not when everything Gerald had built was about to collapse in front of 300 witnesses. The tech asked what was on the drive, Serena said. Blake Morrison, mid-30s, looked competent. I told him it was a backup presentation in case Preston's laptop failed. "He believed you." He thanked me for being thorough. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. People see what they expect to see. A 17-year-old volunteer in a tech uniform must be doing her job. I dropped her at Leora's office downtown. She had homework, she said AP Calculus, and an essay on moral philosophy that suddenly felt less theoretical than it had 3 weeks ago. 2 hours later, I sat in the same parking spot across from the Riverside Convention Center, watching luxury cars arrive in a steady stream. 6 o'clock exactly. The first guests stepped through the glass doors in formal wear that cost more than I'd spent on veterinary supplies in a month. Gerald arrived at 6:10 in a town car, Marlene beside him in emerald silk. He looked calm, happy even. A man about to close the deal of his life, about to transform a failing animal sanctuary into a luxury pet resort that would bill $2,800 per week, while the animals I'd fed for 40 years disappeared into whatever hole he'd dug for them. Alice used to say that Gerald's mistake wasn't greed, it was that he thought money could sanitize cruelty, that if you charged enough, called it premium service, hired the right PR firm, no one would notice you'd built your empire on the backs of things that couldn't defend themselves. She'd written it in her notebook 2 months before she died, in handwriting that got shakier with every page. The price doesn't matter. Cruelty in a tailored suit is still cruelty. I thought about that now, watching Gerald shake hands with donors in the lobby. $2,800 per week, infinity pools and spa suites and concierge veterinary care, all on land where Alice had built functional kennels because the animals needed shelter, not luxury. Where I'd fixed the fence with my own hands because the budget didn't stretch to contractors, and Alice had stood beside me holding the posts steady while I hammered. Preston Sutton arrived at 6:20, carrying a leather portfolio that probably cost more than my truck. He headed straight inside, no hesitation, a man who'd made his career selling beautiful lies to people who wanted to believe them. I checked my watch. 6:30. 15 minutes until the presentation started. 45 minutes until the truth played on a screen too big for anyone to miss. Ranger whined softly. I scratched behind his ears, felt his heartbeat steady against my palm. Soon, I told him. Soon everyone knows what they did to her. At 6:40, I saw Preston through the convention center's second-floor windows. He stood at a podium in front of a massive screen showing 3D renders of Silver Pines, luxury pet resort, gleaming buildings, manicured grounds, happy dogs running through professionally landscaped gardens that bore no resemblance to the mud and reality of actual animal care. Gerald sat beside him on the stage-tailored suit, perfect smile practiced. Marlene sat front row nodding at every word like she'd choreographed this herself. Preston's voice carried through the glass, muffled but audible, transforming premium pet care into an experience that honors both the animals and the families who entrust them to us. I thought about Alice's anniversary jacket, the navy blazer I wore tonight, because she'd worn it to the 2019 gala when Gerald had promised donors he'd expand the sanctuary's medical wing, the wing he'd defunded 6 months later to buy his downtown condo. The jacket still smelled faintly of her perfume jasmine, and something sharp I'd never been able to name. She'd whispered to me that night, standing in this same parking lot before we went inside, "When this is over, remind Gerald what he promised. Don't let him forget." I'd failed then. Let him smooth it over with excuses about cash flow and strategic priorities and long-term sustainability. Let him turn Alice's medical wing into a line item he deleted. Not tonight. 6:43. Preston mid-sentence about innovation and heritage and transformation. Through the window, I saw Silas Kendrick checking his watch every 30 seconds, his face pale even from this distance. 2 minutes left. I reached for the door handle, ready to walk inside, to be there when the screen went black and the evidence started playing. To see Gerald's face when 300 donors watched Marlene talk about dead animals not needing food when they saw the remove list and the destruction contract and the medication logs that proved what they had done to Alice. But my hand stopped on the handle. The timer didn't care if I was in the room. The evidence didn't need me to press play. The truth would come out in exactly 120 seconds, whether I watched it happen or sat here in Alice's jacket with Ranger's head on my shoulder. I'd spent 6 weeks gathering proof, but the proof didn't belong to me anymore. It belonged to everyone about to see it. I let go of the door handle. 6:44. 1 minute. Preston gestured at the renders, talking about premium experiences and legacy projects. Gerald smiled. Marlene nodded. The clock hit 6:45. Inside, the screen went black. The screen went black at 6:45, exactly cutting Preston off mid-word about transformation. And for 5 seconds, 300 people sat in confused silence before the projector lit up again. Not Silver Pines, but a timestamp from 3 weeks ago. And Marlene's face saying words she thought no one would ever hear. The dead animals don't need food, Gerald. They need disposal. The old ones are costing us $4,000 a month. Her voice filled the ballroom through speakers meant for inspirational speeches and donor appeals. Crystal clear, undeniable. Marlene on screen in the sanctuary office standing beside Gerald's desk camera angle, showing both her face and the papers she held. I was still in the truck when the first murmur rippled through the crowd, visible through the second-floor windows. Saw heads turn toward Marlene in the front row. Saw her stand up, mouth moving, probably telling Gerald to do something, turn it off, make it stop. But Serena had built the trigger with priority override. No one could stop it. The screen switched to a document. Destruction contract. Marlene's signature at the bottom, dated 2 months ago, authorizing demolition of the sanctuary kennels and medical wing. The camera zoomed in on her name. Marlene Hayes Thatcher, November 15th, 2023, making sure every person in that room could read it. Then the remove list. I'd seen it before in Clifford's photos, but watching it displayed 15 feet high on a luxury ballroom screen hit different. 23 animal names in red Sharpie. Ranger at the top. Then Bella Sampson, the 3-legged cat Alice had bottle-fed in 2018, the blind horse she had rescued in 2017. Each name 2 inches tall. Each one an animal Marlene had decided was too expensive to let live. The list stayed on screen for 12 seconds. long enough for 300 people to read every name, long enough for them to understand this wasn't abstract business strategy or cost optimization. These were living things with names, things Alice had loved, things Marlene had marked for death, because they ate too much and generated too little donor appeal. 12 seconds in a ballroom where champagne cost $40 a glass. The screen switched again. Bank statements this time. Yellow highlighter showing transfers $340,000. Total Gerald Thatcher's name on every authorization. Margaret's Memorial Fund, the one established after the donor died in 2021, left everything to the sanctuary showed $127,000 withdrawn account. Closed money redirected to accounts that had nothing to do with animals. I got out of the truck, left it running. Ranger jumped down beside me, stayed close to my leg as we crossed the street toward the convention center's back entrance. Inside the ballroom, audio played over the financial documents. Gerald's voice. I recognized it even through the door. As I walked down the back hallway, my son's voice recorded in his office 3 weeks ago, when he thought only Marlene could hear him. Kill the old ones first, the sick ones. Anything costing more than $200 a month, no one's watching that closely. Not embezzlement hidden in paperwork someone else signed. Not plausible deniability. His voice, his words, his order to kill animals his mother had spent 40 years protecting. I reached the ballroom's back doors. Through the window, I saw complete silence. 300 people frozen. Preston still at the podium, mouth half open, stammering something about technical difficulties that no one was listening to. Gerald on stage beside him, face drained white under the lights. Marlene standing in the front row, her hand on his arm, whispering something desperate. Silas Kendrick sat 3 rows back watching. Just watching. His face showed nothing but his hands were folded in his lap, perfectly still. The audio recording played again. Gerald's voice, no one's watching that closely. I pushed open the doors. Ranger and I walked down the center aisle. Our footsteps, my boots, his nails on polished floor, were the only sounds in a room built for 300 voices. Every head turned from the screen to us. Gerald saw me first. His mouth moved, shaped the word, Dad, but nothing came out. I wore Alice's Navy anniversary jacket, the one she'd worn to the 2019 gala when Gerald promised to expand the medical wing. The jacket still smelled like jasmine and the lie he'd told her that night. The trust document she'd signed that same year, the one protecting the sanctuary from anyone unwilling to honor this mission, sat folded in the inside pocket, notarized, legal, ironclad. The center aisle was 60 feet long. I counted my steps. 15, 16, 17. Ranger stayed beside me, calm like we'd practiced this. I'd fought fires for the city from 1992 to 2020. Pulled 11 people from burning buildings, lost 2. Walked into situations where the ceiling was collapsing and the floor was giving way, and every instinct screamed to run the other direction. Never once felt this kind of fear. Not adrenaline fear, not bodily fear, but the cold certainty of a father who's about to end his son's world in front of everyone who matters and knows it's the only right thing left to do. In fires you save people. Here I was destroying one, my own son. And unlike fires, there was no rescue coming after this. No recovery, just accountability. 30 steps, 40. The screen behind the stage still showed evidence Alice's handwritten will, now the 2019 document with the same protection clause as the trust, her signature at the bottom in the shaky handwriting she'd developed in her last year. 50 steps. I reached the stage, climbed the 3 stairs. Gerald stood 5 feet away, frozen, his tailored suit suddenly looking like costume on a man whose performance had just ended. I pulled the trust document from my jacket pocket, unfolded it, held it up so Gerald could see Alice's signature, so everyone could see it. Her name was Alice, I said, loud enough for the whole room. This was her sanctuary. You're done. Gerald's mouth opened. No sound came out. Behind him, the screen showed the trust's key clause blown up 15 feet high. In the event of unwillingness to honor this sanctuary's mission. His mouth kept moving, silent, like he'd forgotten how words worked. I held the document higher, 300 people watching. Marlene collapsed into her seat. Preston backed away from the podium. Gerald finally found his voice. Dad, I looked past him to the 3rd row, to the lawyer who'd notarized this document with Alice in 2019, who'd watched my wife sign her protection into law while Gerald smiled and promised things he never intended to keep. Leora Brennan took the microphone from my hand and faced 300 people who 30 seconds ago were expecting a resort pitch, and now sat in stunned silence staring at evidence of embezzlement and animal cruelty. I'm the designated trustee for the Alice Thatcher Animal Preservation Trust, established in 2019. Her voice carried across the ballroom, clear and professional. Under the trust terms and Oregon law, this sanctuary cannot be converted to commercial use. 2019, 5 years before Alice died, before Gerald married Marlene, before any of this started. Alice had seen this coming. She had chosen Leora, the nonprofit attorney, who actually cared about the animals, to be the failsafe. Leora had known about the trust for years, waiting for the moment I finally pulled the trigger. Gerald Thatcher's actions tonight triggered the incapacity clause written into the trust by his mother. Leora continued. All ownership and control of the sanctuary property reverted to trust protection effective immediately. The sale to Preston Sutton cannot legally proceed. In the fourth row, Henry Caldwell, corporate attorney, late 50s, $800 an hour to tell rich people when their plans were dead, leaned toward Preston and whispered. He shook his head. Mouthed one word, done. The property was untouchable, not because Gerald changed his mind, because Alice had written protection into law 5 years ago, and I'd spent 6 weeks gathering the proof that activated it. Gerald stood on the stage 5 feet from me, looking at Ranger, the 11-year-old dog with arthritis and cloudy eyes. Number 1 on the remove list. The animal Marlene wanted killed first. Ranger looked back. No growl, no fear. Just an old dog who'd survived because his owner had gathered evidence instead of reacting with rage. Gerald's mouth opened like he was going to say something. Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know. She made me. Nothing came out. What words exist for this? For standing in front of 300 witnesses and your father and the dog you planned to kill, watching evidence of your own voice ordering executions. What do you say when the mother you claim to honor built legal protection against you 5 years before she died, because she knew you'd do exactly this? Gerald closed his mouth. The silence felt like physical weight. I turned and walked off the stage. Ranger followed. We headed for the back exit. In the hallway outside the ballroom, I found Marlene. She stood against the wall, phone in hand, staring at Preston near the parking lot exit. Preston looked at her the way you'd look at a stranger at a business meeting. Polite, professional, distant. As this is no longer my problem, Marlene, he said, flat tone. My lawyers will contact you about the deposit recovery. Preston, we can still... No, he turned away. We can't. Good night. He walked out. Didn't run, just walked to the parking lot like a man leaving a failed meeting, got in his luxury sedan, and drove away. Complete abandonment executed with corporate courtesy. Marlene watched his taillights disappear. Her phone vibrated. She looked at the screen. Didn't answer. It vibrated again and again. I walked past her toward the exit. Ranger's nails clicked on tile. She looked up at me, maybe for help, maybe for acknowledgement, maybe just to see if I felt satisfaction. I looked back for 1 second, then kept walking. Outside, the air was cold. January air that cut through Alice's jacket and reminded me she wasn't here to see this, that she'd built the protection and died before watching it work. Leora waited by my truck. She'd slipped out the side door while the crowd was still processing. You okay? She asked. I nodded, wasn't sure if it was true. What about Gerald? I looked back at the venue entrance. Inside, my son was standing in the wreckage of everything he'd built, everything he'd planned, everything he'd thought he could get away with. I don't know, I said. Inside the venue, Marlene stood alone in the hallway, phone vibrating continuously. Call from David Hutchins. Ignored. Call from Rebecca Yates. Ignored. Call from Hutchins again. Ignored. Text lit up the screen. You stole from a cancer memorial fund. Call me now. Call from Gerald. She stared at his name for 5 rings. Let it go to voicemail. He didn't leave a message. The phone went quiet for 8 seconds, then started ringing again. Silas Kendrick appeared in the ballroom doorway behind her, looked at her for 3 seconds, looked away. Nothing left to write. He walked past her without a word. Marlene's hand dropped to her side phone, still ringing. She'd spent 15 years building a life that looked like something. Successful marriage, executive image, social position at every gala and fundraiser and chamber event. The kind of life where people knew your name and wanted your opinion. 45 minutes of evidence on a screen, and she'd become what she'd always feared, being nothing that mattered to anyone. 7 investor calls in 4 minutes. 0 answers. 0 plans. 0 allies. I stood by my truck watching through the glass. Leora beside me. Ranger between us. "He's coming out," Leora said quietly. Gerald walked through the entrance doors, saw us across the parking lot, stopped under the lights. For 5 seconds, he just stood there, then started walking toward us. Not running, not hesitating. Just walking like a man who had made a decision, but didn't know if it was too late. Gerald stopped 10 feet away from my truck, looked at me, opened his mouth, closed it, turned around and walked back to the venue. I didn't call after him, didn't know what I'd say if I did. Monday morning, 72 hours later, Leora's office phone rang 4 times. Oregon DOJ at 9, IRS at 10:15, Vet Medical Board at 11. And a preliminary inquiry from FBI Financial Crimes at noon. Not an investigation yet, but a request for documentation. Leora said that was how it started. A request, then a review, then an investigation. Months away, maybe a year. But it had started. The DOJ call lasted 8 minutes. Elder financial abuse and charity fraud. The agent asked for copies of the trust documents, Alice's medical records from her final year, and bank statements showing the memorial fund withdrawals. The IRS call lasted 12. Dolores had sent her file on Saturday, the one documenting 3 years of fictitious invoices and embezzlement. They wanted to interview her in person, wanted Gerald's tax returns, wanted to know if Alice had filed complaints before she died. The Vet Medical Board call was shorter. Dr. Garrison had submitted his medication tampering evidence on Saturday night, complete with pharmacy records and Alice's symptom timeline. They were opening a criminal investigation, not just professional discipline. Someone could go to prison for what they'd done to her. The FBI call was about Preston. Conspiracy to commit fraud. They'd received documentation of his involvement in the Silver Pines scheme Monday morning property appraisals he'd commissioned, before Gerald had legal authority to sell investor packets promising returns on land. He didn't own yet emails coordinating the gala presentation before the sale was finalized. 4 agencies, 3 hours, coordinated evidence delivery. Dolores to the IRS on Saturday. Dr. Garrison to the Vet Board on Saturday. Leora forwarding everything to Oregon DOJ on Sunday. Preston's documentation to FBI Financial Crimes on Monday morning. Not organic separate complaints. A legal strategy executed by people who had watched my wife get destroyed and waited for the moment to act. How long until I started? Leora shook her head. Months, maybe a year, but it's moving now and they can't stop it. Gerald lost everything in sequence like dominoes. Saturday, 10 a.m. CFO position. Security escorted him from the building. 15 minutes to collect the personal items. Badge deactivated at 3 p.m. Tuesday, Marlene filed for divorce. Irreconcilable differences and reputational harm. Attached asset division claimed the shared bank account. $43,000 transferred to her sole account by end of business day. The leased Audi registered in her name. The downtown apartment lease in her name. Wednesday, corporate credit cards canceled, professional references withdrawn. 3 former colleagues didn't respond to his emails asking for recommendations. Thursday, apartment locks changed. Marlene's lawyer sent notice he had 72 hours to collect belongings, supervised visit only. 1 week, 7 days to lose everything he'd spent 3 years building. Everything he'd chosen when he chose her over his father. Everything he'd protected by letting his mother die alone and planning to kill 23 animals whose only crime was costing too much to keep alive. No dramatic confrontations, no shouting matches or thrown objects or public scenes. Just systematic institutional consequences executed via email and legal notice. I learned about most of it from Leora, who heard from Silas, who was apparently still tracking the story, even though he'd walked away from Marlene in the venue hallway. Sometimes consequences are news whether you want them to be or not. Friday afternoon, 1 week after the gala, Clifford called. "Your son's been sitting outside the sanctuary for 3 hours," he said. "Borrowed car engine off, just staring at the gate." I was at Leora's house. She'd offered me her guest room after the gala, said Ranger and I shouldn't be alone in that rental house with nothing but silence and waiting. I'd accepted because she was right. "Is he trying to get in?" I asked. "No, just sitting, looking at Alice's sign." Pause. "Thought you should know. Thanks for telling me." I hung up, Stood in Leora's kitchen, holding my truck keys. 30 minutes to the sanctuary. 30 minutes to see my son, sitting outside the gates he'd locked himself out of. Staring at the hand-painted sign Alice had made in 1997. Thatcher Ridge Animal Sanctuary. Founded. 1997. Alice and Ernest. I imagined the drive. What I'd say when I got there. Whether he'd look at me or just stare through the windshield at a life he'd destroyed for money and a woman who'd abandoned him the second the cost got too high. I thought about the burning apartment in 1995. 3-story walk-up, everyone evacuated safely. Then a rookie ran back inside for a photo album. Said his girlfriend's pictures were in there. Irreplaceable, he'd just be a minute. We pulled his body out 2 hours later. The fire chief told me after, "You can't save what's already gone. You go back in, you just die trying." I'd seen it a dozen times in 28 years. Firefighters running into collapsed buildings for people who were already dead. Parents diving into riptides after kids who drowned 10 minutes ago. People who couldn't accept that some things end. Some losses are permanent. Some people are gone, no matter how much you want to pull them back. Gerald had made his choices. Married Marlene knowing who she was. Helped her embezzle from his mother's sanctuary. Planned to kill animals because they cost too much. Stood on that stage at the gala and let the evidence play without saying a word in his own defense. I couldn't save him from consequences. Couldn't pull him out of the burning building he'd set himself. Going there would hurt us both without changing anything. I put the keys down. That night I sat on Leora's back porch with Ranger looking at stars over Portland. Leora brought coffee, sat beside me. Didn't ask if I'd called Gerald or driven to the sanctuary. After 10 minutes of silence, she said, "The animals come back in 2 weeks. Clifford and Dr. Garrison are coordinating transport from the foster shelters, all 23 healthy and safe." I nodded, then asked the question I'd been avoiding. "You think he'll show up when they do?" Leora didn't answer, because neither of us knew. 2 weeks passed. Gerald didn't show up. The animals came home instead. The sanctuary gates swung open the same way they had for 27 years, metal scraping on gravel left side, catching on the post. And I drove my truck through them mid-January, 2 weeks after being evicted from the property my wife built with her own hands. Leora had completed all the legal procedures for trust ownership transfer. The property was protected now, untouchable. Mine to steward under the terms Alice had written 5 years ago. I didn't expect the people. 14 former staff and volunteers stood on both sides of the entrance. 2 lines of 7 gravel drive between them. Dr. Garrison in veterinary scrubs. 3 former kennel attendants in work jackets. Serena with her camera at her side, not filming, just present. Clifford wearing the faded Thatcher Ridge 20th anniversary t-shirt from 2019. No applause, no cheers, just standing there bearing witness to my return. Leora sat in the passenger seat. "They wanted to be here," she said quietly as I slowed the truck. "I didn't ask them to come. They just showed up this morning. I drove past them at 5 miles per hour. Ranger looked out the window at each face. None of them approached. None of them waved or said welcome back. They just stood there while my truck rolled past. This is what victory actually looks like, I realized. Not triumph, not celebration, just people showing up. I parked near Alice's garden corner. The wooden bench sat under the oak tree, left leg tilted where the ground had settled unevenly. She'd written about it in her last notebook weeks before she died. Bench by oak needs fixing. I got the wrench from my truck bed. Clifford walked over as I knelt beside the bench. "Animals arrive Thursday," he said. "All 23 accounted for. Healthy transport arranged. You coordinated that? Dr. Garrison and I. 4 allied shelters. None of them charge boarding fees." He paused. "People wanted to help. You just had to let them." Thursday morning, the convoy arrived. 4 vans from 4 different shelters pulling up to the kennel entrance in sequence like they'd practiced. I stood at the gate with Ranger beside me, counting each elderly dog and cat as they were carried to their original kennels. Bella, 1. The arthritic shepherd mix Alice had taken in 2019. Samson, 2. The blind terrier. Duke, 3. The 3-legged cat who'd survived the bottle feeding. Ranger sniffed each passing animal in greeting. Some remembered him. Some were too old or sick to care. All of them were alive. I counted to 23. None lost during 3 weeks of foster care. Dr. Garrison reviewed health charts on a clipboard. "Not one decline during placement," he said. "Your allied shelters took excellent care. Better than excellent, they treated them like their own." Serena filmed the returns on her phone. Not for social media this time. When the last animal was settled, she sent the video to me with a message, "For the record, all 23 homes safe, date stamped." I saved the file to the same folder containing Ranger's eviction footage and Marlene's contract signing, evidence, proof. The kind of documentation that mattered when people later asked if any of this had really happened. That evening after the volunteers left and the kennels were quiet and Ranger was asleep on his bed in the office corner, I sat at Alice's desk for the first time since the eviction. The chair still smelled like her lavender soap. 21 months after her death, the scent lingered in the fabric like she'd just stepped out for a walk and would be back any minute. I opened the drawer looking for an Allen wrench to finish fixing the bench. Found old invoices from 2023 supply receipts, veterinary records I'd filed and forgotten. Beneath them, folded in thirds, a piece of sanctuary letterhead, covered in Alice's architectural lettering. I unfolded it slowly. Dated March 2023, 15 months before she died, a year before the betrayal began. If you're reading this, you found your way back, I knew you would E. Not signed Love Alice or Your Wife or even A. Just E, the initial she'd called me in private for 28 years. Shorthand for Ernest, for us, for everything we'd built together. She'd known, 3 years before it happened, she'd known I'd be pushed out and have to fight my way back. I read it 5 times under the desk lamp, then opened the drawer wider, looking for the Allen wrench I'd originally needed. Behind the invoices where the first note had been hidden, I found a second folded paper. Same handwriting, different date. June 2024, the month she died. I unfolded it with hands that weren't quite steady. The first line read, "If Gerald is reading this instead of you, then I was wrong about my son and I'm sorry." The second line, "If you're reading this, Ernest, then you fought for it. Now, I need you to do something harder." I stopped reading, stared at those words. Something harder. Fighting Gerald had taken 6 weeks of evidence gathering coordination with allies. I didn't know I had a public confrontation in front of 300 witnesses, and the willingness to end my son's life as he knew it. What could possibly be harder than that? Ranger shifted in his sleep across the room. Outside, the kennels were quiet. 23 animals safe in their beds, the sanctuary protected by law, the property untouchable, everything I'd fought for secured. I looked back at the note. "Now I need you to do something harder." I kept reading. Alice's second note said, "Forgive him," in her architectural handwriting. And I sat at her desk for 20 minutes trying to figure out if a dead woman, who'd been right about everything else, could possibly be right about this. The full line read, "Now I need you to do something harder, forgive him. Not for Gerald, for you, so you don't spend the rest of your life carrying what he did." I read it 5 times, put it down, picked it up again. Ranger slept in the corner, unbothered by the weight of instructions from beyond the grave. I called Leora. "She planned all this, didn't she?" Leora said after I read the note aloud. Not a question. "The notes, the trust, everything. I am the important parts," I said. "She couldn't plan what Gerald would choose, just what would happen when he did." Silence on the line for a few seconds, then, "And now she's asking you to forgive him. For me, not for him. She was usually right about these things. Usually." Leora laughed soft and tired. "She never met me, you know. I was 13 when you let me sleep in Kennel 3. Alice was already sick by then, barely coming to the sanctuary. But she trusted your judgment. I remembered that morning 17 years ago. 6 a.m., opening the kennels for feeding rounds. Found Leora in Kennel 3 with a camping stove balanced on the concrete floor, scrambled eggs cooking in a dented pan. She wore a jacket 3 sizes too big, sleeves covering her hands. She looked up when I opened the door, not scared, not defiant, just tired in a way 13-year-old kids shouldn't be tired. "You eat yet?" I'd asked. She nodded at the eggs. "That's Kennel 3's empty if you need somewhere quiet," I said and walked away. Didn't ask her name until day 5. Didn't ask why she'd run until she told me on day 43. Just let her stay. Alice had said, "You did the right thing." Never questioned it. Never asked for details. Just trusted that if I'd sheltered someone, they needed sheltering. "What are you going to do with the sanctuary?" Leora asked, now pulling me back to the present. "What do you mean?" "You're the steward under the trust. I'm the trustee, but it's yours to run." "It's same thing I've always done," I said. "Keep it open. No abandoned soul turned away." That's what I thought you'd say. 1 week later, I sat in Leora's Portland office signing documents that made the sanctuary permanently protected, irrevocable trust terms. No family member could ever sell the property. No one could change its mission. No commercial development, no rezoning, forever. Leora witnessed as trustee, Clifford as operational witness, Dolores as financial witness. She'd driven up from Eugene specifically for this, said she wanted to see it made official. I signed the last page, put down the pen. Ranger slept under my chair, still wearing the GPS collar from the eviction 3 weeks ago. I kept meaning to take it off. Kept forgetting. "How do you feel?" Clifford asked. "Like I fixed the bench," I said. He looked confused. I didn't explain. It was between me and Alice. She'd written "bench by oak needs fixing" in her last notebook. I'd thought it was just a maintenance note. But Alice didn't waste words. The sanctuary's legal structure had needed fixing structural repairs to protect it from people who'd try to destroy it. I'd just signed those repairs into permanence. The physical bench still needed fixing too. I'd do that tomorrow. Driving back to the sanctuary from Portland, I stopped at Morgan's Hardware off Highway 26. The kind of place that still had wooden floors and bins of loose screws sold by the pound. I found a 3-inch Allen wrench replacement bolts for outdoor furniture wood stain in weathered oak, the same color Alice had used on the original bench in 1999. The cashier rang up my items. Ella Martinez according to her name tag. Maybe mid-40s friendly smile. "What are you fixing today?" she asked. "A bench," I said. "Should have fixed it 2 years ago, maybe 3. "Well, better late than never." She bagged the supplies. "Building's harder than fixing anyway." I almost corrected her, said I wasn't building, just fixing, but then realized it was the same thing. You fix what's broken so it can keep doing what it was built for. The bench by the oak, the sanctuary legal structure, the mission Alice started in 1997. All of it needed fixing sometimes. All of it was worth fixing. The document in my truck was signed, permanent, irrevocable. The animals were home, the bench was next. I loaded the supplies in the truck bed beside Ranger's water bowl and headed east on 26. The sun was setting when I pulled into the sanctuary driveway. Orange light cutting through the oak trees, making long shadows across the gravel. Ranger was already asleep in the passenger seat. I'd fixed the bench in the morning, first thing. I parked near the office, killed the engine, sat in silence for 30 seconds watching the light fade, then saw headlights behind me. A car pulling through the gate slowly, hesitantly, like the driver wasn't sure they were allowed to be here. I watched in the rearview mirror. The car stopped 20 feet back. Engine idled for a few seconds, then cut off. Door opened. Gerald stepped out into the orange light. He stood beside his car. Not the least Audi Marlene had repossessed something older and borrowed looking, and looked at my truck. Didn't approach, didn't call out. Just stood there in the sunset like a man who'd driven 30 minutes to arrive at a place he didn't know if he was welcome. I sat in my truck hands still on the steering wheel. Ranger woke up, looked out the back window, didn't bark, just watched. Alice's note sat folded in my jacket pocket. "Forgive him, not for Gerald, for you." I didn't know if I could do what she'd asked, but she'd been right about everything else. I opened the door. The bench had been broken for 3 years. Alice wrote "bench by oak needs fixing" in her last notebook entry. In 2024, 3 days before she died, and I knelt beside it the morning after Gerald drove away in the dark without saying a word. Allen wrench in hand, finally ready to fix what she had asked me to fix, long before I was ready to hear her asking. He had stood by his borrowed car for 10 minutes the night before. I had watched from the truck window the engine off my hands resting on the steering wheel. He opened his mouth twice. Both times, nothing came out. Both times, he turned away from whatever word was forming and swallowed it back down. Then he got in the car and drove away without looking in the mirror. I did not chase him. I did not call out. Alice's note said, "Forgive him for my own peace, not for reconciliation." So I let him go, chose the bench instead. The morning air smelled like wet grass and oak leaves, birds singing from the kennels, sound of 23 animals eating breakfast alive and safe. Ranger slept in the shade beside me while I worked. 2 rusted screws came out easy. The tilted leg needed sanding where moisture had warped the wood. I applied weathered oak stain, matching Alice's original 1997 finish, careful to get the color exact. When I finished, I sat on the bench without needing to stand immediately for the next task. Just sat. Ranger woke up, walked over, sat at my feet. I placed my hand on his head. Same routine we'd had for 11 years. She wrote this in 2024, I told him. 3 days before she died, and she was still making a list of things that needed fixing. Still thinking about the bench. still thinking about what I would need after she was gone. He leaned against my leg, didn't judge the timeline. There, I said, fixed like she wanted. 1 week later, we hung the new sign at the main gate. No grand ceremony, no press, just the people who'd stood witness when I drove back through these gates, gathering quietly to see the mission made permanent. The sign read, Thatcher Ridge, Animal Sanctuary and Veterinary Clinic, / No Abandoned Soul, Turned Away / founded by Ernest and Alice Thatcher, 1997. Leora stood to my left, Clifford to my right. Serena filmed it on her phone for the record. Dr. Garrison leaned against his car. Silas stood in back without his camera. Ranger sat at my feet staring up at the sign like he could read it. Alice picked the font, I said. She was specific about these things. A few people smiled. No one laughed. That felt right. Later, when everyone had left, Leora asked, "Did she actually pick the font?" "No," I admitted. But she would have. She would have picked exactly this one. She would have had opinions about the spacing, too. Leora looked up at the sign. "It looks like her," she said. That was the right thing to say. The sign hung level and clean, professionally made, but using Alice's exact wording from the hand-painted original she'd made in 1997, "No abandoned soul turned away." I remembered her painting those words on plywood in the driveway, 7 months pregnant with Gerald, saying, "This is what we're building, not a kennel, a promise." 27 years later, the promise was permanent, protected by trust law, engraved on metal that would outlast everyone standing here. Silas took no photos. There was nothing left to document. The story was already written. That night, I sat in my truck outside the sanctuary. Didn't sleep there anymore, but tonight I wanted to sit where I'd sat when everything collapsed, now that everything was rebuilt. Ranger jumped into the passenger seat. His GPS collar still blinked green every 30 seconds. I kept meaning to take it off, kept forgetting. Or maybe I liked the reminder tracked accounted for, not lost. I opened Alice's notebook to the last page. Her handwriting, bench by oak, needs fixing. I pulled a pen from the glove box, wrote below her words, fixed. The ink took 3 seconds to dry on the old paper. 3 seconds where the word was still wet and changeable. Then it was permanent, fixed. The bench, the sanctuary, the mission, the gate, everything she'd built, everything I'd fought to keep. I closed the notebook for the last time. 27 years of her handwriting. Lists of medications and feed schedules and vet appointments, and that one line, bench by oak needs fixing, and now my single word beneath it, fixed. I set the notebook on the dashboard, left it there. The new sign hung in the streetlight glow, metal letters catching orange light. No abandoned soul turned away. I looked at Ranger. "Let's go in. We're home." We got out of the truck, walked toward the gate together. The same walk we'd done every morning for 27 years. Morning patrol, checking the property, making sure no one was abandoned overnight. Except, tonight I wasn't walking out. I was walking in. Tonight I was the abandoned soul the sanctuary caught. Abandoned by my son when he chose money over his mother's mission. Abandoned by certainty when Alice died. Abandoned by the life I thought I'd have, the one where my family stayed whole, and my wife didn't die, and my son didn't become someone I had to fight. But the gate stayed open. The sanctuary kept its promise. No abandoned soul turned away. Not even me. Ranger walked beside me, nails clicking on gravel, GPS collar, blinking green in the darkness. Both of us tracked. Both of us accounted for. Both of us home. I looked up at the sign one more time. Alice's words. Alice's mission. Alice's promise kept. We walked through the gate. Behind us, the metal creaked the way it always had, left side catching on the post. Needing oil, needing fixing eventually, but not tonight. Tonight it stayed open. The kennels were quiet. The oak tree stood in darkness. The bench sat level and solid beneath it. I'd spent 6 weeks gathering evidence, exposed my son in front of 300 witnesses, signed away commercial profit to protect animals most people forgot existed, fought to keep a promise my wife made before our son was even born, and I'd won. Not because Gerald lost everything. Not because Marlene got abandoned the way she'd planned to abandon 23 animals. Not because investigations would eventually hold them accountable. I'd won because the gate was open, and I walked through it, and the sanctuary was still here, still doing what it was built to do, taking in abandoned souls, all of them, even me. Ranger and I walked to the office. I unlocked the door. He went to his bed in the corner. I sat at Alice's desk. The chair still smelled like lavender soap. Outside, the sign caught streetlight. No abandoned soul turned away. We were home. Both of us. Finally, home. And to you, listening to my story, remember this. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't about winning. They're about choosing what you can live with when the dust settles. I spent 28 years thinking family loyalty meant protecting people from consequences. That's the mistake I made with Gerald looking the other way. When Alice first noticed the small discrepancies, the subtle changes, the warnings, I convinced myself were just stress or grief. Don't make that mistake. When something feels wrong, trust it. Loyalty to family doesn't mean enabling destruction. Stories like these, the kind you hear in family Reddit stories about family betrayal, revenge, they're not just entertainment, they're warnings. When someone you love prioritizes money over people, over animals, over the mission, your wife died protecting you, face a choice, stay silent and become complicit, or act and lose what's left of your family. I chose to act, and I believe God put me through this to learn that forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It means releasing the weight so you can keep walking forward. That's the lesson. That's what Alice understood before I did. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment below. Have you faced family betrayal, revenge situations where doing the right thing meant losing family? These family Reddit stories matter because they remind us we're not alone in navigating family betrayal, revenge. If you know someone dealing with similar family Reddit stories, please share this. And subscribe to Dad's Silent Revenge for more stories about choosing truth over comfort. Thank you for staying until the very end. I appreciate you being part of this journey with me. Final note, while this story is based on real emotions and lessons, some details have been fictionalized for storytelling purposes. What matters is the message, and I hope it stays with you.